A CEO gets paid, a cleaner gets paid, a full-time mother does both jobs and gets paid in appreciation. In my speech, a few points of framing and 2 arguments. First, what does this motion look like? Women stay at home all day, cooking, cleaning, raising their children, doing laundry while the husband goes to work. This reminds me of something. Oh, right, the world before feminism. These women's full-time job is to literally tend to their family, and in doing so, they don't contribute to anything financially. Unpaid domestic labor is literally the definition of exploitation. It is the largest subsidy in modern capitalism. The housewives have 2 scenarios. Even if you're willingly a housewife, in which case this motion may not be the important thing, you would still be contributing to the household's finances. However, the truly vulnerable actors in this motion is the housewives forced by the situation. This is the truly vulnerable groups. These are housewives forced to stay at home, not because they want to, but because they're either unable to get a job due to the patriarchy and competition in today's world, or because of the social norms in whatever areas they're living in. Now, onto my 2 arguments. Onto my first argument about empowerment and respect that this motion brings. Being a housewife has no financial value. It makes the woman financially fully dependent on their husband. Even women who choose to stay at home quickly find that it's not a choice. It's a one-way ticket to literal financial disenfranchisement. They lose their career progression. They lose their retirement savings, and they lose their employability as they grow older. This choice locks them into dependency, right? Dependency isn't just about spending money. It's about losing the power to leave the situation. In abusive situations, financial dependence is the primary barrier to escaping. A salary provides a literal lifeline to these women. A housewife archetype is seen as someone inferior who, however, in reality, the work is equal, if not more, than those of men in corporate businesses. Cooking for their kids and their husbands every single day is not much less of a job than that of a chef or a nutritionist. Scheduling their kids after school activities or their weekend events is not much less of a job than that of a logistics manager. The issue is society only notices this work when it's not done. They only notice dirty houses or hungry kids. They don't notice perfectly clean houses or kids who are eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, because this is seen as something that's feminine and something that's expected. Paying a salary forces recognition from society of the constant invisible skill given by these housewives. By doing this, it provides much more awareness and exposure for the public to the reality, increasing respect for these women. Money is societal respect. A salary transforms the entire social label, and it ensures that a society is actually aware of the work their housewives do. By giving them a salary, it gives them the financial independence they need to get into the working class to become even more independent on their own. 2, on gender equality and fighting social norms of the patriarchy. Think about the U.S.'s perfect nuclear family: a standalone house, a giant front lawn, a puppy, 3 children, a breadwinning husband, and a stay-at-home housewife. This is the exact image of a family from the 1900s or the 1800s, where gender inequality prevailed and the society was consistently oppressive of women. This is not nostalgia anymore. It is oppressive and seriously concerning in today's world. The entire character of a housewife is the embodiment of this. Our society claims to value family, yet it monetarily values everything except the work from the housewives that make family life actually possible. Work historically done by women, such as caring for their children, nurturing, maintenance, is culturally framed as natural or instinctual or an act of love, and thus it's beyond economics, it's beyond payment. This is a patriarchal ideology designed to avoid payment. By empowering women, we fight the social norms of patriarchy, increasing women's capacity for work. We fight the patriarchy by severing its association with unpaid femininity, unpaid labor. We make it something worth the value that it is actually worth. True gender equality means men and women can genuinely choose roles without one choice carrying a massive financial penalty. This policy makes caregiving a viable, respectable path for anyone, hence proud to propose.
Today we are here to prove that it is not fair for housewives, and second, but we are not here to prove that all women need to be housewives. Now, moving on to our team's model, we believe that the government will be paying this average salary for housewives, and yeah. So moving on to our team's rebuttals. They talked about one main argument, which is about respect and women's rights. However, this is not true because it's their personal choice if they want to be a housewife, and it's not like being a housewife is the only thing they can ever do. That they can also do things that pursue their passions or stuff like that. Now, therefore, their argument does not stand. Now, moving on to our team's first 2 arguments. First, average payment for all housewives is unfair. This is true for rejected. This is true for 2 reasons.
I'll do it.
First, because average payments for all housewives is unfair. This is true for two. First, some housewives do more work than others, so they deserve more. If one housewife does more than another and they still get paid the exact same, it is unfair for those who are doing more and those who are doing less. The second rejected. The second reason is that some families are richer than others. If the housewife works hard, but the government can't afford this average salary, it is unfair to the housewife. Um, okay. Um, uh, for example, this is true for countries who are in a lot of like debt and can't afford even public needs for like roads or hospitals. When there are countries who can't even afford this type of average needs for humans, then house salaries for housewives is absolutely out of this picture. Now moving on to our team's second argument, that it pressures women to become housewives. For example, if you saw something online that says housewives will be paid an average salary by the government, you'd probably want your mom to become a housewife to get the extra share of money for your family. However, the problem of this is that your mom might not want to do it, but she's being pressured by the entire family. In the end, she becomes a housewife under the pressure of her entire family, even against her own will. So, Judge, I've told you a few things in this speech. First, the average payments for all housewives is unfair. And second, that it pressures women to become housewives. Therefore, we win this debate. Thank you.
So for centuries, society has relied on a convenient lie that work performed inside the home is not labor, but merely duty. We are here to dismantle that lie. We are here to argue that the path to true women's empowerment requires us to stop treating domestic work as a hobby and start treating it as an essential economic contribution. So before we justify our case, we must be clear about who this policy impacts. We are not talking about the working mother who holds a corporate job. It is status quo when a mother works outside the home. The family usually hires a helper, a nanny, and pays for daycare. The market acknowledges that the work of raising children and managing a home is so difficult that a third party must be paid to do it. But we are talking about housewives. These are women who often, due to the cultural norms or like specific agreements, stay home. In these scenarios, the family does not hire a helper. Why? Because the wife is the helper, she is the nanny, and she is the chef. Now, before I advance, let's clear up the mess Op is trying to make regarding the how. So first of all, this is a belief motion. We are debating a principle. However, we can reasonably assume that if this belief is adopted, the implementation will be rational. We are not suggesting a husband hands his wife cash. The most likely sustainable version is like a state payment. Why? Because the state is the beneficiary of the next generation of taxpayers. Just as the state pays for roads so people can get to work, the state should pay for domestic labor that produces those workers. We're happy to defend the state paying this wage, hence proud to propose. First, rebuttals. On the idea of choice and passion, first Op said that being a housewife is a choice and that women are free to pursue their passions instead. However, this is a fantasy that ignores economic reality for millions or even billions and the majority of people living worldwide. The illusion of choice is that for millions of working class families, there is no choice here. If childcare costs more than a mother's potential salary, she must stay home. It is not a passion project, it is an economic necessity. Now, on the unfairness and different workload argument, they argued it is unfair because some housewives do more work than others. Now, this applies to all jobs, okay? Some office workers work harder than others. They still get a base salary. Some teachers have difficult students, some have easy ones. They still get paid. The existence of variance in workload is not a reason to pay zero. Now, on how more women will become housewives. Finally, they warned that this will pressure more women to stay home. Now, the current pressure is worse, okay? Right now, the pressure is financial dependency, as our first speaker said. A woman stays home and becomes trapped because she has no money to leave. And financial independence is if she is paid a wage, she has her own bank account. The husband is abusive, and then she has the funds to walk away. Now, onto my substantives. First argument is that the current economy is built on false data. Currently, GDP calculations measure the value of a nanny, but they value the labor of a housewife at zero. This is economically illiterate. About the infrastructure of capitalism. Domestic labor is the engine of the economy. It produces the next generation of workers, the children, and sustains the current workforce, which is usually the husband. If housewives went on strike tomorrow, the real economy would collapse immediately. Now, B, about the policy impact of this. Because we value the labor at zero, we treat it as infinite and free. This leads to bad policy making where governments cut social services, assuming women will just pick up the slack at home. Now, what this will change. When we assign a monetary value to this work, we force the government to recognize it as like essential infrastructure. It shifts the societal mindset from viewing care as a private hobby to viewing it as a public good. Now, onto my second argument, solving the care crisis. Society is currently facing a crisis of care. We have aging populations and children who need raising, but we have made it economically suicidal to stay home. Firstly, the status quo trap is that currently society tells women to be valuable, you must work in a corporate job. We also expect them to manage a home. there is a double burden here. It leads to burnout, plummeting birth rates, and stressed households. Secondly, onto like societal benefit. When a woman can afford to stay home because it is paid position, the quality of care for children and the elderly improves. We get a more stable society with better raised children rather than children raised by exhausted parents working 2 shifts. Finally, onto my last argument, looking at the long-term burden on the state. In a status quo, a housewife works for 40 years and she has no pension, she has no social security contribution because she has no pay. If she is widowed or divorced, she crashes into poverty. Now, who pays for her then? The state. We end up with a massive demographic of elderly women relying on emergency welfare. Now, we are a solution to this. By paying a wage now, we allow these women to build savings and pension contributions. It creates like financial security in the old age. Sure, if a stranger did this work, we would call it a job. When a woman does it, we call it duty to avoid paying her. That is exploitation. For the sake of recognizing that care is work, this motion must and will stand. Never been prouder to propose.
Paying money for something optional creates pressure and turns that volunteer work into exploitation for money. As the second speaker of the opposition side, we strongly oppose the resolution. In my speech, I will first rebuild our first speaker's arguments, second, rebut the proposition, and finally deliver our team's third argument. Before I start, I want to clarify what we're supporting. We're not saying that housewives shouldn't have something in return for their hard work. We're only saying that they shouldn't have the average salary for every single housewife, because they're in different living environments. Okay, now moving on to rebuilding for our first speaker. My first speaker talked about two main things. First, choice, and second, pressure for women to stay home. First, against our first argument, they talked about ignoring economic reality. However, we believe that the comparison from money to women's well-being, the women's well-being are more important because they're getting paid to do housework, they're likely to suffer even more abuse than there is and over exploitation because their family probably wants them to stay home so they can earn another share of money, but this can actually act as extra labor for them even though they might not want to do it. Second, they talk about pressuring women to stay home. We talk about pressuring women to stay home, but they say that women are trapped because there's no money to leave. However, this is only the minority of people right now because feminism has gotten a bit better. So therefore, most husbands are not as cruel to their wife. It's not like men don't give their wife any money. It's like, look at your mom, or at least my parents, they're really nice to each other, right? And they both have a job. So women don't have to be set the stereotype of simply being a housewife. Yes.
If you say that both your parents if both your parents have a job, then why exactly are the women pressured to become housewives to get a salary if they already have a salary anyway?
Well, this is an extra share of money. So some families that are, especially the ones in poverty, then they're more likely to be forced to earn that extra share of money. And also, we can't just judge all the families the same way, right? Like, even if in my family, my mom does have a job, but in some families they are housewives and they choose to be that, right? But then this job is set a price, then that does no longer is a volunteer. No, thank you. And that becomes exploitation and labor. So now moving on to my rebuttal, they say that it provides respect and empowerment to women, but this is not a job. They're caring for their family, and besides, it was their choice in the first place. But even if they do want a job, well, they have the choice to go get one. They shouldn't be expected to stay at home. Paying them to stay is actually preventing them from getting a real career that they love. Do you think mothers want to stay at home and feed their babies? No, they want a real career. They want to be like a designer, a doctor, a scientist, or anything. And paying them money for this stereotype enforces it even more and pressures them to stay as a housewife they're expected to be in society. This isn't helping at all. And second, they talk about earning independence in financially. However, Judge, when you hear the word independence, do you think of staying at home and cleaning after children or pursuing a career that you really love? Though women have independence.
POI.
Rejected, and I won't be accepting any more POS. This is the wrong way to earn financial independence. If they really want independence, we should allow them to pursue a career instead. Our third argument, because I don't have enough time, I will only provide a summary. It turns love and care into exploitation because it's not a job in the market. There's no regulation to protect women, so it's even more dangerous for them to suffer over exploitation. Therefore, women's love to their family becomes exploitation and labor, and the impact is that it can cause even more abuse and less independence. Vote proposition. Sorry, thank you. Opposition. Sorry.
My name is Davonna, and I'm the third speaker for the proposition side. And today in my speech, I'm first going to give you two rebuttals, and then I'm going to weigh the clash about gender equality and what is actually matter in this debate. So first of all, the opposition says that we are putting a price on love as in their last speech, but this is untrue. We are only putting a price on labor. Love to someone doesn't equal to you have to do labor for them, much less forced labor that we talked about. When a nurse holds a dying patient's hand, that's compassion. But when she administers medication and changes bandages for it, that's skilled labor, and she is paid for it. We demand the same clarity for housewives. You can love your job as your housewife and still deserve a paycheck. This is just the minimum compensation. So then on to my clash about gender equality. So first of all, the current system isn't equal. It's rigged against caregiving. Right now, if a woman or anyone chooses to care for a family at home, they are punished economically. There's no income, no pension, and no security. That's not even freedom. That's a financial danger disguised as a choice that opposition is talking about. Policy removes that punishment, and it says if you choose to be a caregiver, you won't be left poor and powerless. That is real freedom. Secondly, equality isn't about forcing women into a man's world. It's about making women's world valued as equally as a man's one. So for decades we've asked women to do men's work when they wanted equality, but men's work isn't the only work that counts. This mindset devalues everything traditionally done by women, like raising kids, caring for elders, and keeping a home. Real equality means raising the value of women's work, not just pushing women into men's jobs. Thirdly, money is power, and our plan gives these housewives powers, as we said so many times. The number one reason women stay in bad relationships or abusive relationships even, or can't leave abusive situations, is because they have no money of their own. Our salary will change that, and we believe that giving financial independence to these people at home is more important. So this is the most important clash because the whole motion exists because of a historic gender injustice. For a long time, work done mostly by women has never been counted as real work and seems to become a stereotype that has been expected of these women. Every other argument that opposition presented about cost, logistics, etc. is secondary. If we do not fix the core injustice that has been around for so many years, we're not fixing anything. So why do we win this most important clash? So we win this clash as the motion can directly give to the caregiver, again, giving her economic power and the ability to make real choices. This is supposed to be happening, and we believe that it should be happening because it's a very important part of the kid's life and this woman that might have been pushed into this relationship. Opposition to the world where they don't support this makes housewives vulnerable like how they were a long time ago. We offer dignity, not just survival. We want housewives to have a salary because their work matters, and we give respect while the opposition doesn't. So now about cultural preservation. So we believe that if your choices as a housewife are either work unpaid at home with no financial security or work paid outside while still doing housework for free, then that's not a free choice. That's just basically choosing between different forms of exploitation. So currently in low-income households, the choice is already brutally economic. If childcare costs more than the lower earner's wage, which is often the mother's, then she's forced out of the workforce. And also, especially in poor communities where these housewives maybe can't offer a job because they don't have enough education, then what are they supposed to do? They're supposed to just stay at home and care for their children because they're trying to make the most out of their life, even though they're in poverty. But this is not worth it because they're doing all this labor and caring for their family for no money. So then we believe giving them this money will allow them to get out of poverty and start sustaining their lives. So equality doesn't mean every woman must have an office career. Equality means every woman has a real, safe, and respected choice, and that they work women done is always valued as it should be. I'm proud to propose. Thank you.
Just to clarify, we never said that women have to be housewives. We only say that not all housewives should have the exact same salary as the average if it works differently. Some women don't need that salary if they have a job. We're only saying that all women having the exact same pay for different quality work isn't fair. So first of all, general setup that I'll do in this speech. So first of all, I'll talk about the clash, and then I will provide a few rebuttals to the opponent's side and then clarity about their argument. And then finally, I will, if I still have time, then I will rebut our team's argument. So first of all, about the clashes, two main questions in this debate. Number one, is it fair for housewives to get the exact same average at the exact average salary as the others? And secondly, what is better on our side than the government side? So as we know, the motion is to pay housewives the average salary, right? Well, we tell you that it's actually not fair for the housewife to get paid the same as the average if they work much harder than the others, right? And plus, you're taking away a woman's freedom and right. Not every married woman needs to be a housewife, right? It's more of a personal choice. So like the opponents, I believe that they also mentioned that why would working so isn't it true that working women would also be pressured if they also be a housewife? Well, you tell you that if a married woman already has a job, right? Well, it's not necessary for them to still be a housewife. Again, it's more of a personal choice. If they don't want to act like a nanny and take care of the child, they can hire not nanny, right? And it's
POI.
and if they want to be a CEO, then it's their choice if they want to reject it. So first of all, now let me explain why our side is much more better than the opponent's side. So first of all, the opponents also kept emphasizing that all married women or mothers should be housewives. Well, we tell you that the opponents cannot absolutely define that all women would want to and should be a housewife, right? Well, it's actually not fair for the woman's right? And I believe the opponents also talked about that. So it's actually so the opponents are actually contradicting to their own argument, right? So now let me move on to rebuttals to towards the opponent's side. So first of all, just to clarify, the proposition's first speakers talked about how there should be respect and independent earning, right? Well, the opponent kept emphasizing that being a housewife is the most suitable for a job for a married woman. Well, we tell you that this point is completely flawed because if you actually want to respect if you actually want respect among women or housewives, reject it. I will not be accepting any more POIs from now on. Well, if we actually want respect among all women or housewives, then we should actually let them choose what they want to be, right? Well, the opponents also wanted to prove how women should have human rights. Well, that's exactly how we let women have human rights. The opponents keep on saying that we should force or trap women inside the house just to regulate them to be a housewife. Well, sure, poor income families can have women be housewives, right? But we're not saying, but not all of the women should be housewives, right? And also, if a woman already has a job, it's not like they should quit their job, right? It's still unfair for a woman. And also rebutting proposition's second speaker. So they three things that they mainly said. Well, firstly, they talked about forced labor. Second, care prices, and third, long-term burdens, right? Well, okay, so firstly, being a female doesn't mean that all women will don't have enough money to succeed and leave the house. Also, opponents are directly defining that all women won't have money to set foot out of the house, right? But how are they absolute that uh about that? I'm sure that opponents have to agree that not all mom wants to act like a nanny and take care of the children, right? Well, I'm sure that in the future, if they are in a situation like that, I believe that all women or most women wouldn't want to take care of their kids if they were forced to, right? They should have human rights and they should have their own choice and personal choice if they want to be a housewife or not. Therefore, proud to oppose. Thank you.
The same amount of money has a way different value depending on the person. As the reply speaker for opposition, I will explain the two main clashes in this debate and why we won both. First clash is on independence. Proposition claims that women earn financial independence from the money or they're trapped inside their home. However, we say that independence isn't being stuck home cleaning. They have the choice to a career outside of their home. The status and we win because the status quo isn't like what they're saying anymore. Men don't abuse their wife and give them only enough money for food and clothing. So the society is way different than before. Now, actually, women have more power than men at home. Some in some families, the women hold more power than the husband, and women are actually the one controlling the money. So the society is not like before, where men overpower women. Now women actually have more power. So like in your life, it's actually a really small majority. It's a really small part of the society that women don't have any power or independence. But also we're saying that their side actually makes it worse because it pressures them to stay home. And second of all, it's fairness. They say that all women that are working at home should have the money have money for their hard work. However, we're saying that all women, they work differently and they work at different qualities of cleaning. So then we think that they shouldn't just all get the same amount of money. And also they should have the choice and not just get the average for every single housewife. For example, as they asked in a POI, some women do work. Yeah, and we agree with that. Because some women do work, we shouldn't just give all housewives the same amount of money, because that could actually make them want to stay. But instead, if we give different amounts of money, then the working women can have the choice to keep working, and the housewives can have the choice to earn money for their work. Vote opposition. Thank you.
So Op debated a fantasy world where every woman has a high-paying career option, a supportive husband, and affordable childcare. We debated the real world. We win this debate because we provided the only safety net for the most vulnerable people in society, while Op refused to acknowledge they exist. First, on the choice fallacy and the incentives to work. The entire Op case rested on a misunderstanding that our first speaker already corrected. But third Op repeated the idea that we are forcing all women to be housewives. Now, this is false. We explicitly distinguish between the working mother and the housewife. In their world, a woman chooses a career to gain money. In our world, she still chooses a career if she wants to earn more than the average housewife salary, or if she finds fulfillment in corporate work. The incentive to be a CEO or worker still exists. However, for the millions of women in low-income communities where childcare costs more than their potential wage, staying home isn't a choice. It is an economic necessity. Op ignored this demographic entirely. We win because we protect the woman who must stay home, while opposition only protects the woman privileged enough to leave. Second, on power and safety, this was the most dangerous contradiction that Op made. They argued that paying women would lead to more abuse, yet they also argued that independence comes from a career. Let's be clear about this. Money is power. Op argued that a husband might force a wife to stay home for the check, but consider the alternative in the status quo. The husband forces her to stay home and she has $0. In our world, she has a bank account. If he is abusive, she has the funds to buy a bus ticket and leave. You cannot walk away from abuse with empty pockets, with nothing. By giving housewives a salary, we turn dependency into employment, providing the very exit power Op claims to care about. Third, about the dropped arguments, Op failed to engage with two critical points like I made earlier on. First of all, we told you that housewives currently crash into poverty when they hit old age because they have no savings. Op said nothing. We are the only side preventing elderly women from starving. Second of all, they complained that some housewives work harder than others, so it's unfair to pay them. We rebutted this by pointing out that office workers also have varied workloads, yet they still get a base salary, and Op dropped this. You cannot deny a woman a livelihood just because her neighbor might wash fewer dishes than her. So in conclusion, Op is terrified that valuing domestic work will stop women from becoming CEOs. We are terrified that valuing domestic work at zero is starving women right now, right this very moment. And for the sake of the woman who works 16 hours a day but is told she does nothing, we beg to propose, which is why this motion must and will stand.